So I want to take a moment to talk about these guys, the Rebel Forces SpecForce Infiltrators. These guys were the most feared of the special force units the Rebels threw at the Empire. They first appeared in this Rebel source book, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen before, but most people don't understand what this book is. And we'll do a whole video on it, but the summary is this is a in-world book where Mon Mothma, after Alderaan was destroyed, realized that a lot of the documentation about the founding of the rebellion, the early treaties, and then the formation, it was lost with Alderaan. So she commissioned this officer to go and, after the Battle of Yavin, start to document everything before and to document the history of the Alliance as it tries to overthrow the Emperor. And this report took place between Battle of Yavin and before the Battle of Hoff. They established the Hoff base here, but it hadn't been discovered. And that's good to know, to understand that it's like the first 2 years after Yavin that it captures. And this is critical for the Infiltrators for one reason, because while this book was made for a role-playing game, in world, it was a real report, and the combat efficiencies of ships and units and equipment were ratioed out. So you knew a TIE fighter was faster than an X-wing, but this is how an A-wing performed maneuverability wise, or what the shield ratings were, or whole structural integrity. And they did the same thing for fighting forces, their offensive capability, their technical capability. And you would think that the guys who look like this, the guys who they show us in the book, rappelling down, taking forces by surprise, the elite troopers, you would think that these guys would have the best stats and ratings. And people are like, they messed up. The Infiltrators have some of the worst combat capabilities of all the forces that they identify. And this book doesn't say why, because it's just capturing what was going on. And that's what I want to talk about for a moment, because a lot of people I know are like, well, this report just got it wrong. They took the most elite force and they had like basically civilian level capability. And I'm here to say I think that's true, because let's talk about the spec forces of the Rebel Alliance. So they were the child of General Crix Madine. You probably saw him in Return of the Jedi. He planned out the Rebel Alliance, but shortly after he defected to the Alliance, he started to build up what would be the spec forces of not sector by sector, but Alliance High Command that they would model down to all sectors and all systems. And if you know Crix Madine, he was responsible for I call them shadow troopers. I think they're called storm commandos. So these guys, these storm commandos, Crix Madine, he was in charge of that project. And if you look, these storm commandos, their gear looks very, very similar to this. So when these reports talk about how infiltrators were able to get past sensors, move past undetected, it wasn't because they were ninja-like in their school. They had the best tech that they stole from the Empire. And they don't talk about it in this book, because this was before the Battle of Hoth. It was considered top secret that Madine was taking the Storm Commando unit and modeling it in the Alliance with that tech. But you could see the similarities. And so step one, the guy who did this stole the tech from the Empire. Now, Infiltrators had some of the most successful mission ratios of achieving the objectives. They also had the highest casualty rate, and that goes into why their combat efficiency when captured in this report is so low. And so hear me out here. So this is what happened. Especially after the Battle of Yavin, the Rebel Alliance was flooded with individuals that had hope that something could be done about the tyranny. There were a lot of people across the universe who had lost their family, lost their livelihood, maybe lost their title or honor, their business. Just the Empire, especially in the Outer Rim, was pushing and taking. And there were a lot of people that lost everything. And you know, instead of crumpling up and fading into nothingness, they wanted to just burn out. They wanted to hurt the Empire. They wanted to join the Rebel Alliance. And they weren't joining because they wanted to see a better government and have a better life. They wanted revenge. They wanted to strike back against the Empire. And so the Empire was creating the number one resource that the Alliance needed: people who wanted to hurt the Empire. And General Medine knew this. See, it talks in this book about, like, he really learned about conditioning the elite soldier's mind to achieve an objective. And special forces, it's not that they shoot 100 times better than everyone else. It's not that they're not these Jedi. They're just determined to get the job done. And they have such a drive and hatred and determination that their own preservation isn't the primary factor. And we're going to get into that because that's what Medine exploits. See, Medine knew how to take people who wanted to hurt something and mold that into a scalpel to use against the Empire. So as people who had a certain psych profile, they talk about psych dossiers in the SpecForce that Medine set up. You know, you would look at recruits, and there are recruits that are like, okay, you're gonna go work in the fleet and you're gonna help guard these bases, and you know, there's a lot of different jobs, thousands of different roles needed for the Rebel Alliance to function, and many people wanted to do their part. But you see, what the SpecForce recruiters were looking for, especially for the infiltrators, were people who had lost everything. Not that they didn't have anything to live for, but really it was that. It was people who didn't mind going against, you know, on this dirty dozen-like mission to hurt the Empire. So they would go to them and say, look, you could be a normal trooper. We're going to go station you on, you know, Dantooine, or you could be a Hoff elite guard base on this frozen planet, or we could train you for 6 months for a mission that could make the difference in winning the war. We're going to be honest with you. You know, your chances of surviving are low. We project high casualty, but high impact. If you want that type of job, if you're up for it, we have a branch for you, the Infiltrators. You'll look badass, and you know, and propaganda videos are coming out how these guys are the guys that are basically like ninjas, sneaking behind lines. And you know, I'm not making this up. In fact, you can deconstruct the role of Infiltrators and why this is true in this book on their Operation Cobalt. We'll do a whole video on Operation Cobalt, but the Irivus sector, it was one of the first treaties where the systems joined under Mon Mothma's leadership after the Gorman massacre. She united everyone, and they realized, you know, that they needed a top-down, almost like franchise template to help this sector. And General Medine, the efforts are documented here for Operation Cobalt. It starts with the high level, and I'll just run through it in like 30 seconds. On Dantooine in the Arias sector, they installed a supercomputer, and the Alliance wanted to get this for decoding purposes. It was in a space station, but they wanted to go in, get the computer, but destroy the space station and anyone who could see what happened, so it would look like like it was just a hit and run to destroy an Imperial facility, but really it was to get like a code-breaking computer that would turn the tide of the war. Really important. And in the briefing meeting, they're talking about they're going to launch this by taking a shuttle in, very much kind of like in Mandalorian season 2, how you could sneak in with a shuttle to get in. And they're gonna, they propose we'll send 10 infiltrators in, and they'll get in and they'll drop the shields, they'll attack the guns, they'll hit the power supply, allowing our strike to go in. And Medine even says, there's a lot of troopers there, I think we need 20 men. And they put together this 125 spec op task force, which works with various system starfighters to come in and lure TIE fighters away after a shuttle team already got in. The shuttle team, they sprung with surprise. The infiltrators, they weren't the best marksmen. See, these Imperial facilities, there was one flaw in their countermeasures. And in fact, I'm going to read something here because I think it's really important to nail what the infiltrator role was, especially during this period. So infiltrators, so they were trained to slip through the enemy's lines in order to sow confusion and secure areas. So just realize the sowing the confusion. They were often like the Trojan horse in a battle, springing surprise attack. And in this battle, they went out, they surprised the Imperial forces in Operation Cobalt above Mantuine, and they brought the shields down. X-wings, Y-wings had pulled off the TIE fighter wing, and then transports with 3 commando squads came in, SpecForce squads, and they went in, they tried to save civilians, they tried to take out Imperials, they got the computer on fast, they made it look like this Mantuine base went down and disintegrated in the atmosphere. And I bring this up because out of this task force, every single infiltrator on this mission perished. One of the commando squads was wiped out, and another one was inflicted half casualty. They lost 63 men, 13 ships in this battle, but it depicts exactly what the infiltrators did. They were people that joined the Alliance, and they were droid salesmen, businessmen. They were common people. They weren't the elite warriors, but they were given a chance to go on an elite mission and do the damage. And then later on, like after the Battle of Hoff, after Endor, even as we get into the New Republic era, this Endor is probably the changing point where people are surprised they actually overthrew the Empire, and the roles of the infiltrator shifts a little bit. Instead of being, I don't want to say they're cannon fodder, they're not, strategic sacrificial scalpels, they became more the elite group. In fact, they set up Shen's task force. I think it's called, Task Force Shen, under Major Shen. And he runs 2 companies of infiltrators, 2 squads of 20 men with some technical support. And they are running what you'd think of like SEAL Team 6 operations, but in thousands of infiltrator, these are the top 50 guys that in a universe that make it back. And if you look at their ratings, I'm not saying that they're like on par with the Imperial Guard, but they're really good at sneaking in with their equipment. They're really good at using like Terracosi to take down their opponent and silently take them out. So where I'm going with this is you have to realize that, the original Alliance book and then the New Republic report on what these guys are contradict each other, because infiltrators did end up being the elite of the galaxy after hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of them died on countless operations to overthrow the Empire. And, I'm sure the propaganda information leaked by the Rebel Alliance is that the Mantuine base was wiped out by 20 infiltrators. That's what they would leak. So the Imperials would read, wow, 20 infiltrators went in and took out this facility, and they took out all the witnesses, and they would leak footage they would capture just from the infiltrators. And the infiltrators were a weapon of the mind as much as they were a scalpel through security. And now I can't remember if I said this, but the number one thing they took advantage of is the Imperial defenses counted on, well, no one will try to counter this and survive. And they were right. But what they didn't count on is that there would be so many individuals in the galaxy that would be willing to throw their lives away to just strike back at the Empire, hurt them. So that is why I stand by that if you look at the rating of infiltrators from the Battle of Yavin to the Battle of Hoff, they were common people that were given the opportunity to step up, train for a few months. Most never made it back. The reports cover that. By the time you get to the New Republic, well, the cream of the crop have survived, have been lucky. They can afford more training. It's not just about, training for an operation to steal the payroll of a sector. So, that's what I wanted to share. A lot of people I was talking with really felt that this report got wrong the combat rating because they only know infiltrators from what the New Republic history books have. And, you look at them from Yavin to Hoff, and they're a very different fighting source. They are elite soldiers because they're expendable and they get the job done. So, just wanted to share my thoughts on infiltrators because when I went and looked, I haven't seen anybody that was talking about, what they really were. So, hope you enjoy. I'll do some videos about this report and more early history of the Rebel Alliance. So, hope you enjoy this. If you have any questions, put below. Thanks.